I want to know everything there is to know about you.
I am going to introduce me.
You must have spotted her by now. She's always there.
Don't I deserve love?
Somebody has to like me best.
I do believe that one of the most famous books in history is buried out there, the Book of Amun Ra. It contains within it all the secret incantations of the Old Kingdom. It's what first interested me in Egypt when I was a child. It's why I came here, sort of a life's pursuit.
And the fact that they say that it's made out of pure gold makes no never mind to you, right?
You know your history.
I know my treasure.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Don't Know Her. As always, I am Scott.
And I am Michael.
And we are back again to talk about another familiar face in the world of cinema and someone who we wish we were all talking a little bit more about. And this time round, we're talking about someone who I think was a very, very familiar face to many, maybe around 20 years ago or so. But at the moment, based on sort of upcoming films, is hopefully making a little bit of a comeback. This week, who are we talking about, Michael?
We are talking about Brendan Fraser, who, when I was a kid, he was a pretty big deal. Like, he was in all these movies which myself and my family and friends would love, and he just felt like, I'm not sure I even knew what a movie star was then, but I knew that he was a leading man in these stories. And he was goofy and silly in the ones I saw as a kid. And we'll go into, like, he obviously was making other films too. But he, I don't know, he was like the epitome of a Hollywood leading man in these family-friendly, somewhat silly adventure stories.
Yeah.
Like
sure.
George of the Jungle or The Mummy. I don't know, I just really loved him. And he actually he's the sort of person we had on our list from the start. I was like, well, can we talk about him? Because he's so famous to a certain group of people, yet, as we'll talk about, how he has removed himself from Hollywood leading roles, whereas, on his words, was like treated like a piece of meat. He is less famous and less celebrated, really. But yeah, for a time, like, he's in a Best Picture winner. He's in these big grossing movies. Yeah, he's super.
Yeah, he is. He kind of always gives me the warm tinglies, and I don't mean that in a saucy way. It just means that he brings about a very immediate nostalgia. But that's interesting what you say about him being probably wildly famous to our generation, but maybe less so to even other sides of it. Not like if you were to ask a 15-year-old if they knew who Brendan Fraser was, there's a solid chance they wouldn't have the first idea. Um, but maybe even if you ask those also significantly older, maybe a lot of these films he was making, although massive at the time, and I think have lasted and have become kind of cult favorites and all these. I don't necessarily know how familiar he would be to older audiences too. So maybe he does hit a little bit of a sweet spot, but hopefully not, because I do think he really is terrific, and I think he does deserve to be thought of very, very fondly. And I think we should all be excited for the things he has upcoming, because he deserves the attention again. And the stuff that he does have upcoming seems to be a kind of fun departure. Well, when I say a fun departure, maybe not so fun, but a departure from the more familiar things and those things that we're talking about mostly probably in this.
Yeah, like, he's going to, and he's like, it's a lead role in a oh my god, I can't say his name, Darren Aronofsky film, The Whale, where he, like, based on a true story of this man who is overweight, and Darren Aronofsky, oh my god, Darren Aronofsky, am I saying his name right?
Yeah, you are,
Darren
but
Aronofsky.
you take it slow.
It just sounds strange in the way I say vowels. He, famously brought back Mickey Rourke for The Wrestler, and in this big comeback film. So in some ways, I guess there's a lot of I don't know, like, there's reason to have faith that he'll do the similar for Brendan. And then we have him in a supporting part in a Martin Scorsese film.
Yeah.
So hopefully this podcast episode will age so badly that by 2023, if you're listening then, it will be like, why the hell would they be talking about Brendan Fraser? Like, he's going to have, like the Judy moment where Renee Zellweger comes back in this big way, or Sandra Bullock, even when people are like, oh my God, look, she's a serious actress because of The Blind Side. But then she goes on to do Gravity, and there's no questioning Sandra Bullock as like a big star forever. Or even Matthew McConaughey when he came back with Dallas Buyers Club. I don't know, there's something about this trajectory that I'm like, yes, this makes total sense. And what a story, really, to have, been celebrated as a very physical presence on screen in terms of like the sort of performance, in terms of the way he uses his face and it's like slapstick comedy, as well as his body. Literally, like George of the Jungle is a lot of his body on it. And yeah, to have him come back as like a proper serious actor where he's just transformed in such a different way as a person off screen, and that's allowed him to show his talents on screen. So, like, do you remember when you would have first known who Brendan Fraser was or seen him?
I mean, I'm sure it was The Mummy, but it could have been other things. I imagine he already was a familiar face to me when I saw The Mummy. Back in, it came out in the late 90s, the very end of the 90s. And I remember that being something that we rented from the video store and watched of a joy-filled Saturday evening as kids. So I'm sure it was that. And The Mummy is definitely something that I remember very, very fondly. So I'm sure that's where he came to me. What about you?
Well, I'm pretty certain I would have seen George in the Jungle very close to either in the cinema or close to it coming out. I like the song, even like rewatching the trailer and stuff in preparation for this. That song, I remember, in the playground, like talking about it, playing George of the Jungle, like what's some made up game. But I wouldn't have known who he was. In The Mummy, I was a little bit obsessed with ancient Egypt, and I remember seeing The Mummy in the cinema. I connect that with lots of different things at the time, like watching The Prince of Egypt again in the cinema, in school, learning about ancient Egypt, rewatching because it was on TV, the Elizabeth Taylor Cleopatra, like all of these sorts of things. Carry On Cleo, the amazing entry into the Carry On series with Amanda Berry as Cleopatra and Kenneth Williams as Caesar. So yeah, there's I don't know, it's just like it captures my imagination, and The Mummy is yeah, we'll talk about it, but The Mummy brings out the little child in me in terms of the sense of adventure and everything. So yeah, that would have been it, really. And do you know what? Funny with Brendan Fraser, I don't think I noticed he was gone. Like he wasn't making films anymore until like my niece and started getting into movies that I would have been into as a child. And I was like, God, Brendan Fraser really, like, that's wild that he's not a star anymore, and why is he not? And we'll touch upon all those things, but it's just really, he's just a fascinating person, and like he's a performer who, even at that time, or even with what he has done, because they've not all just been these big budget adventure comedy type things, he is quite good. Like, he is good. He deserves more praise. So yeah, I'm so delighted we're going to be talking more about his career and him.
Yeah. Yay, Brendan. Welcome back.
And I think I should probably say now, if I say Fraser or Fraser, I mean the same person.
We're talking about
I've no idea.
All the Brendan.
I'm talking about, all versions of how people might pronounce. I'm just being inclusive. It's not that I'm like terrible at remembering or saying names. So yeah. Okay, shall I? And on that note, of that, building myself
I can't
up,
wait to see how many times you can say it in this introduction. It's going to be great.
how many? I'll just call him Bren. And let me give a little rundown of what Brendan Fraser has done.
Please.
So it all started in 1968, where he was born in Indiana. And his parents are Canadian, so he is a Canadian and American citizen.
Ooh.
Which I don't know is rare, but everywhere makes a point of this, so it's exciting for me to say out loud. So hopefully it's exciting for you to hear. because of the work that his parents did, he moved a lot around during his childhood. And while in vacation in London, he saw his first professional theatre show in the West End, and
Oh.
apparently that's where he caught the acting bug. Absolutely would love to know. I tried to find out what the show was.
Oh.
I was loving if it would have been like Maggie Smith in, Hedda Gabler or something. I
Oh
love
my
that.
god, that would be correct.
But again, I'm not very good with time, so those timings may not have worked out. Anyway, he then went to Seattle's Cornish College of the Arts and graduated in 1990, and began acting in a small college in New York City, and then planned to further study a Master of Fine Arts in Acting until he went to Hollywood, and that's where he decided to remain and give film a big go, which worked out in his favor. So in 1991, he gets his film debut as a sailor. I've written sailor, but does that make sense? A sailor headed to Vietnam? Let's assume that's true. So that is Dogfight. So 1991 Dogfight, where he plays a sailor or a soldier. And then in 1992, he gets the titular role of Encino Man in a film you forced me to watch for this podcast, and we probably will never talk about, but about him. He basically plays like a prehistoric man who's defrosted so that Sean, oh my god, Sean Astin, is that who it is?
Yes.
Hobbit. As a kid,
The
like
Hobbit.
basic, he is a Hobbit.
Yeah,
Or
I
was
know,
a
not in
Hobbit.
real life, but yes, he was
Oh,
Samwise
sorry,
in
that's
Lord of the Rings.
Samwise Gamgee. Yeah, he basically defrosts this man, prehistoric man, played by Brendan Fraser, and a lot of like childish fun happens. It was a moderate hit and has become a cult film. And he builds on this with films like School Ties, where he co-starred with Matt Damon and Chris O'Donnell, and The Scout with Honors and Airheads in 1994. And then the big moment for him really is George of the Jungle in 97. So he's playing, again, the titular role of George of the Jungle. And a big Disney film, a big, big hit, which is then quickly followed by 98's Gods and Monsters, an Oscar-winning film starring Ian McKellen as the creator or creative genius, I guess, behind the Frankenstein films. And another, what would you say, another notch on his belt, having an Oscar-winning dramatic role.
Yeah.
Sorry, not Oscar-winning. He didn't win an Oscar. An Oscar-winning film under his belt. And then, of course, The Mummy, which is the biggest commercial film in his career in 1999, which again is followed by The Mummy Returns in 2001. And during this like big time for him, he has things like Blast from the Past, The Quiet American, another drama film starring a Brit, this time Michael Caine, Looney Tunes Back in Action. He also appears in the Best Picture Oscar-winning film Crash in 2004. This is the height of his fame. And from this point on, there's a steady decline in his profile. He does do The Mummy 3, called The Mummy Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in 2008, and Inkheart, which I think does have a special place in a lot of people's hearts, which also in 2008. But apart from that, the films don't tend to have much of an impact. In TV, he has different parts in different series, but I guess most memorably for a lot of people would be the season 3 of The Affair. But his work is less and less successful from this point, which Brendan has talked about quite a lot in the last while, in the wake of the Me Too movement in particular. So there's a few different elements, but he did have a public divorce. His mother passed away. There was also, he was physically hurt through a lot of these films, hurting, knees, I think his back, all sorts of things, injuries he had, which takes its toll, medication, all these sorts of things. But also there's sexual assault allegation, I guess that's the word we have to use, although it seems very clear that it did happen, where he alleged Philip Burke, who was the then president of the Golden Globes, sexually assaulted him at a luncheon in 2003. And he had, while it wasn't public, it was known within the industry. He was asking for an apology, a written apology from the Golden Globes, all this sort of thing. And he has said that there was a backlash against him for this, which seems completely credible and believable. So then I guess it's not surprising from like 2004, his career declined so much, which is really, it's just really sad. Like, it's sad to see so many different elements of, I mean, there's no positive story on sexual assault. And this is just like one of the many like awful kind of examples of Hollywood being the system it is and was, do you know, like, and maybe in some ways him talking about it and everything like that, let's hope that there has been positive in that way in sharing that story. But he essentially had very little high profile roles until this year, if these films come out, or next year, which is wild, really. So like, he did do the Steven Soderbergh movie was last year called No Sudden Move. So he has a supporting role co-starring with Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro, Kieran Culkin. But like, he has this trio of films: The Killer of the Flower Moon, which is the Martin Scorsese film; Brothers, which is directed by Max Barbacow, who is the director of Palm Springs, this amazing movie that's on Amazon Prime. And so I'm excited for whatever this person does next. And also, as we also mentioned, The Whale, Darren Aronofsky's next film. So it's clear that he's going to be in more high profile films. And I'm really interested to see what this next stage of his career brings. He is no longer, you know, the six-pack young babe sort of role, himbo sort of part, which he is probably most famous for. Even in, you know, the drama films Gods and Monsters, he is a himbo in the similar way, or he's utilized in a similar way of being slightly, you know, a beautiful man who is not all there in terms of intelligence. And, you know, he does play against that sometimes, like Crash, but he's clearly going to have to step away from that now. Those sorts of parts won't come to somebody in their, oh God, I can't do my math. What age would he be if he was born in 1968? Oh my God.
1968
50s?
means he's 54 this year.
54, yeah. So someone in their 50s who, you know, it doesn't look like Robert Redford or somebody like that in their 50s. You know, he's not the pinup that he was. The matinee. I can't say anything anymore. He's not a pinup. So it's really, I'm just so fascinated and excited. And he's like, in some ways, like, free. Like, he doesn't have to fit what we're expecting of him anymore, because those expectations were purely based on looks. Like, that is what he was. And he's a very, in some ways, he's a kind of asexual, and he played a lot of those like Born Sexy Yesterday sort of characters where he doesn't really understand the world that he finds himself in, or literally the world, if we're talking like from Blast from the Past, where he like doesn't understand what's going on because the family have like thought they were going to be bombed or nuked. They go into like their basement downstairs and lock themselves up for however many decades. So he's born there up until whatever age he is in his 20s, 30s, and then is released into the world and has no idea what's going on. And then you have like Gods and Monsters, where he's, you know, finds himself in this world of film and this kind of gay man, and he's lusted over and he doesn't know how to behave. But yeah, he's really great at that sort of Born Sexy Yesterday thing. And we don't tend to see it with men a lot. That's always used for women. It's constantly used. So it is good that he was utilized that way, but I'm basically much more excited to see what he will do now and how people will utilize that sort of, you know, naive, I don't know, kind of character or charisma that he has. Or
Mm.
maybe that's just something he won't be doing at all, and we have no idea what this new Brendan Fraser is going to do.
Yeah, well, hopefully it is one of the exciting things. To be honest, I hadn't clocked when looking at what he had upcoming that Brothers was directed by um, the chap who made Palm Springs. So that's way more exciting. I know Glenn Close is in it too. So hey, big things
Yeah.
ahead for both of them. Wildly exciting.
Oh my god. I hope she has a break at some point. Poor
She
Glenn.
needs it exactly. She needs her moment. When will it come? That woman has not been given the chance to do anything in her career.
She won't be ignored.
So yeah, I hope that these films will be as exciting as they look on paper, basically, and the caliber that comes along with them. I mean, it's very promising. Surely the Scorsese films going to be. I mean, that's so promising. So yay, I hope so. But you're right. That's really interesting because he was born sexy yesterday. I like that. I hadn't actually heard that expression before. But he is. It's a certain type, and he had done it so many times as this kind of naive type person that you suggest. Very charismatic, bumbling, but very, very charming. So it's really interesting to see what we're going to get from the 2022 Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, or 2023. Are we definitely getting these movies this year?
Well,
I don't know.
around. We'll circle
Yeah.
these couple of years.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Let me start with asking you a question, Scott. What is
Please.
your favorite Brendan Fraser movie?
My favorite Brendan Fraser movie is. Oof. I mean, that's a hard one to answer. Actually, what do I think my favorite is? Um, I mean, I didn't rewatch it for this, but I was always very, very charmed by Bedazzled. But I don't know how that actually holds up. The Mummy holds the kind of most fun nostalgia, but I think Gods and Monsters is probably the best thing he's worked in.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Like, I would say my favorite is The Mummy.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gods and Monsters is up there. And Bedazzled, oh my lord, what a movie. It doesn't hold up, no. In terms of, there's a lot of problematic elements to the story. But Liz Hurley as the devil will always be one of my favorite casting choices that has happened.
There are riotous moments in that film.
Who are you?
Promise not to tell anyone.
Okay.
Cross your heart and hope to die.
Yeah.
I'm the devil.
Okay. I think somebody's had too many martinis.
But yeah, The Mummy, I think The Mummy is really special. Like, it's of its time in a way. It's like this perfect 90s film in terms of it looks back into like old-fashioned Hollywood adventure stories. But it's pre-CGI, so like everything is physical. So when you're watching it, like, and you see like the ground is falling beneath them, you can tell that that is real. Like, a lot of that's real. Of course, the CGI, quite famously, I guess, is used a lot in the first one anyway for the actual mummy, and some of it's questionable. In the second one, is like the worst use of CGI, where the
Yeah.
Rock turns into the Scorpion King. But in general, when they're running through the tombs or the temples and all this, that's all real. And I feel like the chemistry between Rachel Weisz, who plays this kind of nerdy librarian who then needs the help of Brendan Fraser's, like, what would you call, like, he's like not stupid, but he's muscle more than brains, and he just wants money, and he's not interested in the history or the structures or this ancient Egyptian customs, and they have to work together.
Hello, excuse me. We both found your puzzle box, and we've come to ask you about it.
No.
No.
No. You came to ask me about Hamunaptra.
How do you know that the box pertains to Hamunaptra?
Because that's where I was when I found it. I was there.
But their chemistry is so good. It's just such a fun time. And you have just so many like delightful parts to it. I think Rachel Weisz in particular, she is not the sort of character. Say when I watch Marvel movies now, let's say take out like say Black Panther, and in general, when you have a female character who's a love interest, their role is kind of to be a damsel in distress or kind of be like, no, don't do that, or let me help you. Like if you think of Zendaya in the recent Spider-Man film, she's kind of just there to support him. She is propelling the story forward, Rachel Weisz, in The Mummy. She is the one like wanting to do this. She fights men all the time. There's a whole thing where her brother is fighting the female villain, and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm not able for it. Like, I wish Rachel Weisz was here." And it's like, yes, of course. Like, of course you want her on your side. There's no question that she is able to fight anybody as well as Brendan Fraser. Um, and I think that's really special. And I think that's the sort of thing I responded to a lot as a kid.
Okay, that's really interesting.
But I loved
Yeah.
it. And also, who doesn't love the idea of going off on a romantic adventure?
Mhm. It is just so fun. But I think you have kind of covered the main reasons because I was watching it back and although I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe if I was to watch this for a first time today, how would I feel? But I couldn't work it out just because the nostalgic factor and just the swashbuckling immersion of it is just too irresistible to think otherwise of. But why do you think it is successful? Do you think it is that tactile nature? Films at this time, besides the awful CGI, more so in the sequel, The Mummy Returns, but do you think it's that there is a sense of place? There's a sense of them being there and being part of this, and therefore there being a sense of all of the people being involved, the extras. Do you think it is that it feels more? I mean, it's very Hollywood and it feels, inauthentic in that way, but it does feel there. Do you think that's part of why it's successful and why it maybe holds up in this way that it seems to for our generation? Like we're able to kind of look past the more questionable elements at play because it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it seems it's very self-aware of what it's doing because of the films it's referencing are these old 1930s style films where they themselves are not historically accurate. So this is not ancient Egypt, really. This is just like a wild kind of what ride.
Yeah.
And more, it's kind of a world which is understood to not really have much importance on the real world. Like I don't think like it works. There's some horror elements, there's thriller elements, there's a romantic element. So it's not afraid to merge all of these genres into one. So I imagine that's why, really. It's just not taking itself seriously, which, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that, like, the more recent remake of The Mummy with Tom Cruise, like, the problem there, from the little I've seen of it, I would imagine, is that it took itself way too seriously. And I think we see that way too often in films. Like, even I'm shitting on the Marvel films again, but, they take themselves so seriously in comparison to something like The Mummy. And I think we're starved of those sorts of films, which is probably the other reason why we would hold a film like the 1999 Mummy so, uh, nostalgically close to us because, like, oh, I'd love a film like this.
Yeah, that is a good way of looking at it, and hopefully the tide is sort of turning. I mean, we've just had the Lost City out, the Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum film, and it feels more in line with this sort of kind of charming romp
Yeah,
type adventure, romantic cinema, and actually Channing Tatum, Brendan Fraser. That there is kind of
similar, yeah.
a similarity there. I think even though Channing Tatum is a more immediate pin-up type, he now leans into the goofier side and plays that very very well as well. Like he is really funny in the same way that I think Brendan Fraser was in say The Mummy or a lot of these other films from this time. So hopefully, I mean, I don't think the Lost City it won't last in the way that The Mummy has lasted because it doesn't have the kind of joy that something like The Mummy has. But I'm hoping that from that, I don't know, people are recognizing an appetite for it. I think in making The Lost City, a lot of the cast involved there we're kind of echoing that sentiment. Like we don't
Yeah.
get films like this anymore; they don't exist
Yeah.
anymore, and I think that's so sad. But maybe it's great that we have these things, and maybe all we need is to kind of go back and enjoy them because we certainly can, and they're available too. How did it? How did it play on the big screen? Because you went and saw it in the cinema very recently, the Mummy films.
Yes, I went to the Great Prince Charles, which is this cinema in London's West End, and yeah, I saw a double bill of The Mummy and The Mummy Returns. Yeah, it played really well. Like everybody was loving it. It also was like an actual film. We were watching it, so it's not a digital version. It was film, so it
Amazing!
was even added to the nostalgia of it.
Yay!
Yeah, everyone just it's just such like I don't mean to keep going on about Rachel Weisz, but um it's just like she was glowing. Like they were all there's a lot of attractive people in the film, but God, she's luminous in both, and you just want to hang out with these people and go on this adventure. And the way she falls for Brendan in it, and he kind of falls for her, but is more aware of like, you know what, this probably isn't going anywhere. It's just all it was just so sweeping. Um, the first one in particular. The second one, which it just doesn't operate as well. Like I think it's probably one of the few examples of people having children, like the lead character settling down and having children,
Yeah,
sorry, in this case, having one child, and that child just creating such a like narrative issue that like you
yeah.
don't have children in stories like that anymore. It's not that it's not the fault of that there's a child there the whole time.
No.
It's just kind of retreading things, but it not quite working. There are elements that work really well, but in general, it's just not as tight as the first one. I think that's the other thing about the first film of them in the Mummy trilogy is that it is so happy with this simple story.
Exactly. It's the simplicity. The second one, The Mummy Returns, I was actually really excited to rewatch it. However, remembering that it was not nearly as kind of liked as the first one, but it is just chaotic. It is messy. The CGI is too distracting in the way that the worst CGI in the way that I sort of think of like the Star Wars, the 90s
Yeah.
noughties
Yeah.
trilogy of the Star Wars film, the Phantom Menace, the CGI completely threw me out of it because it. Whereas I'm talking about the Mummy being this tactile world, even though it sets a lot of the time and whatever
Yeah.
else, the this stuff feels fake, like computer gamey. The Rock's character in particular, like what in the fudge is going on? Like him as as the Scorpion King
So
is
wild.
it's so weirdly bad considering it's not like, oh, but it was early. No, 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 it was 2001. We'd had examples of CGI a million times better in the 80s and 90s than we are getting in that. And the budget must have been enormous. It is so strange. I think it was just at that must have been a turning point with CG where they were investing so much in putting it and having it being a driving force in the films that I don't know. It's like, wow, what is going on?
Yeah. And his acting, the Dwayne Johnson, who I think has, however he's done it, I don't know if he's been getting, training or whatever, but he is a really competent, and that sounds like a backwards compliment, but he's really good. He's a really charismatic lead now, say in films like Jumanji.
Yes,
In
absolutely.
this film, it's just bad. Like it's just
He's
bad from like
horrible.
his performance, the CGI. It makes cats look like the best CGI you've ever seen. They look like real cats. And it's just weird, the Scorpion King thing. But yeah, no, but it's not as shit as I remembered or like it
No.
was the memory. I've not seen the third one. I did not watch it for this. I'm so sorry, Brendan. But yeah, I just couldn't watch The Mummy without Rachel. She to me is her that makes it as much as Fraser or the Mummy. Oh, I just love it all. I love how they have like the subtitles and it's in this like old fashioned text and font, and it's just
Yeah,
so melodramatic. It's so good. It's like
yeah.
a soap opera.
It's delicious.
It's a delicious adventure story. Yeah, and I just love that that came like on the back of like George in the Jungle, or George of the Jungle, I should say.
Mhm.
Um, And what a like I wish I was in my late teens or my early 20s at that time because you would have had say like Gods and Monsters closely followed by The Mummy. Like, to me, I think like that would be like Brendan Fraser can do everything. Like, he's in these, quiet, kind of small budget, but quite meaningful and independent film. And then you also have him in this big budget film, which is also kind of out of the norm of, it's not like whatever Con Air or whatever else was big at the time. I don't know. I would have been really excited to see a combination of those two things.
For sure, but I think it must have been partly responsible for the rise in getting a lot more of that following this. I mean, Pirates of the Caribbean, say, for example, came out in 2003. And I think the approach that Pirates takes owes a lot to what works in something like The Mummy, is really just going for it with that fun adventure, playing up to the melodramatic elements and allowing there to be this romantic sweep. But then also playing with that self awareness you described and having the humor. Um, that stuff is long since faded.
Yeah, it's a shame. And Brendan's not actually going to be bringing that. That's not the sort of vibe he's after anymore. But hopefully, as you say, Channing Tatum and Sandra Bullock, there's other people to continue that trend. Even Rachel Weisz, I'd love to see her in another like action adventure,
Oh well, yeah, and she is not that it
comedy,
matters, but
big budget film.
she is just as beautiful now. She's a wonder.
Oh my god, that woman. Maybe we could get, Elizabeth Hurley and Rachel Weisz in a film together, and it's some sort of film about a romantic. Oh my god, a lesbian. Oh my god. Okay, sorry. Now I'm getting like my mind's gone wild. But a same-sex um swashbuckling adventure, like they're like kind of like Indiana Jones, like the Mummy, and they have to go and find some relic somewhere. I love
Yeah.
it. No idea why Liz Hurley would be doing that. She's busy, probably. I don't actually know what Liz is doing now, but she's probably having a great old time, never working again in a film.
Oh, we're thinking of you, Liz.
And speaking of, this is a really terrible segue. I apologize, listeners. But speaking of incredibly camp and amazing British icons, shall we talk about Ian McKellen in Gods and Monsters?
Oh God, I don't think he would begrudge that as an entry, but yes, let's do it. Gods and Monsters, Sir Ian, and his Oscar-nominated turn in Gods and Monsters as James Whale, the creator of the Frankenstein films.
Yes, and we meet him in his elder years, and he is, aging quite. He has aged quite a lot. He hasn't worked in quite a long time. He's kind of like a he's almost isolated in his home with his side like best friend, confidant, maid, nurse, played incredibly well by Lynn Redgrave, who is just what a great part and what a great performance. And but anyways, these two people in the house, and the new gardener comes, Brendan Fraser, and of course, Sir Ian is interested in this very attractive, sweaty man. And they're. Well, that's funny. I feel like a lot of at the beginnings, like he's just sweating in the heat. So, this is a world where homosexuality is not accepted in terms of the mainstream, but it is within people's homes. So, it is like an open secret. James Whale was known to be a gay man. He was openly gay. That's one of the reasons his film career was not as long as it could have been or fruitful. And there are other examples of openly gay people within the industry, like George Cukor, who makes a very fun appearance in the film. Not George Cukor himself, but someone playing George Cukor. And yeah, it's a interesting look at homosexuality at a time where love couldn't be explored, or accepted even. Like there's just like it just wasn't possible at this time. Like his behavior in McKellen's sorry, James Whale's behavior, because I'm gonna get as I'm like threatened with libel. McKellen as James Whale, his behavior is questionable. Like by today's standards, like this film, if this came out now, there would be so many interesting things to that would be talked about, with the public. At the time, I imagine there's a lot of like, well, that is how gay people behave. So there's a lot of like him kind of finding ways of getting his kick, basically getting his sexual desires met in a world where he cannot freely explore that.
I'm ready when you are. Oh, that shirt, Mr. Boone. Oh, it's new. Yes, I am sorry. It's just too white. It's too distracting. Would it be asking you too much to take it off?
Well, I'm not wearing an undershirt today.
Oh, pish posh. I'm not your Aunt Tilly.
You did say that you just wanted to draw my face, right?
Oh, well, if it's going to make you uncomfortable, perhaps we can find something else for you to wear. Yes, we could drape this across your shoulders, like a toga. Would that help you overcome your schoolgirl shyness?
All right. Take his shirt off.
And it's a really delicate and sensitively explored film. Like I think it's so well done. Like it's Bill Condon has gone on and directed things like Beauty and the Beast and the live action version and Dreamgirls and all sorts of things. But this is just so beautifully judged. Like I
Yeah.
just think he's done such an amazing job with something that could easily, particularly rewatching it now, feel like just unpleasant and nasty. And instead, it's like, no, this man is so lonely, and this is so like he knows himself that this is bad, like this behavior is not okay, and we're given enough time to understand that and to judge him, but also empathize with him, and that's quite a hard thing to do.
Yeah, big time. I think, and you just threw the kind of keyword out there, is empathy. I think this film was made with a shit ton of empathy, both writing, direction, Ian McKellen's performance. It's not going down the route of, oh, poor old James Whale. It's not doing that. It's very honestly representing what he probably was like in that stages of his life, and representing how he got into that place and what it looked like, but doing it really delicately and showing both sides. It had so much empathy. It understood, and didn't feel judgmental. It was just laying out a story and telling it really wonderfully. I'd seen this film before. I remember really thinking a lot of this film, but I was kind of knocked out by how beautiful it is visually, and as well as just how it's told. I am a huge fan. Ian McKellen is absolutely magnetic in this. But Brendan Fraser is a really, really great counterpoint, because it is that sort of goofiness that we see in the adventure romp type films that helps helps bring this character to life, and allows their relationship to be explored and developed in a really interesting way. It allows the perception of the audience in the film to also be explored in a thoughtful and interesting way. So everyone is performing, I think, at the top of their game in this film, and it really shows. It's a
Mm.
really great piece.
Yeah, I can't recommend it enough, and I guess like you were kind of suggesting, I guess, and I apologize if I'm wrong, or I apologize if I'm wrong. When I was thinking back on it, I was like, "Oh, this is a niche film. Like, this is a film for people that are interested in film, are interested in homosexuality, and stories about queer stories, or just want to see Ian McKellen give an amazing performance." But I'm like, no, this is such a great film. Like, this is just so good. There are so many great moments. I would have reflected on Brendan Fraser and Lynn Redgrave's performances, but not really as highly as Ian McKellen's. But having rewatched them, like, no, these are fantastic. Like the interactions between them, like she is like this she's doing so many different things, but the scene where she's like kind of she's disgusted by his sexuality, which is so important to the story because we don't see the outside world, so we need something and to tell us how, I don't know, people view homosexuality, and
Yeah.
how much more effective could it be than the person that you rely on the most to think of you as the most disgusting person, because simply based on who you desire. It's a really interesting choice, because she's a based on a few different people in his life. So it was a choice by Bill Condon to do that. But yeah, her interactions with Brendan are really brilliant and funny and heartfelt.
What kind of man are you? Are you a good man?
Yeah, I'm a good man. Something about me make you think I'm not?
You will not hurt him?
Lady, I'm gonna sit in a chair and he's gonna draw my picture. Is that gonna hurt him?
No.
And then you have Ian McKellen spouting some of these, like the dialogue, some of it is just so fascinating. Like he is, quick, he's sharp, he's funny, he's sexy, he's all of these different things. And it's just it's just so moving. And so so through the film, he deteriorates his health and he starts to reflect on his life a lot more increasingly. And it's just so beautiful. Yeah, like I don't, and maybe this is oversharing, but thankfully I don't feel lonely in my life, right now anyway. But watching this film gave me such a sense of loneliness, and
Yeah.
it's just beautifully captured. Yeah, I can't recommend this enough. And Brendan Fraser is super. He's just so good. Like, it's probably the part that's requires the least. Like, you have Lynn Redgrave doing an accent, being very physical, all these things. You have Ian McKellen, being the lead of the story and having to convey an awful lot of emotions. But Brendan kind of comes in again as the Born Sexy Yesterday guy to figure out what's going on, to figure out if he's, safe, if he's not. Does it matter if he's straight, does gay, what is sexuality, all these sorts of things. He's not met a person like James Whale before. And yet he's enticed by him because of his success and scared of him because of his sexuality. So yeah, it's a fascinating film. Loved it.
Yeah, agreed. A hard recommend as well.
So like the only film really that I've had to watch that I've never seen before when looking at Brendan Fraser was Airheads. Which, so I guess I had not seen any film. Sorry, I had known a few of his films or whatever pre George of the Jungle or pre The Mummy, but I had never even heard of Airhead. And because it co-stars um, Adam Sandler and Steve Buscemi, I was like, okay, I'm really like, yeah, this will be really fascinating because Adam Sandler, this is pre him being a big star too. And you basically have them all doing what they do best. And in a film that's, if I was a teenage heterosexual boy, I maybe would have got a lot out of it in my teenage years. And they're just like these young men who want to be musicians and take over a local radio station, but have no plan, and through lots of different issues, don't really get to have their song played, and it goes on and on and on, in terms of how they're going to get their moment to shine on the radio station, and it's grand.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it before either. I just know it was an important moment in his career, and like you say, because it sort of was the same for Adam Sandler and Steve Buscemi. I think it both works really well and really doesn't work. And I think that's why it doesn't maybe hold up as it could have. Because I think the premise is so much fun as you describe it. And as it builds, this sort of spiraling out of control, the farcical side of it is really fun and infectious again. As many of his films are, there's a real infectious energy to it. When these crowds are forming outside of this radio station because they're getting invested and it's sort of turning into this rock show situation. I really found that all really involving and exciting, and I could feel myself wanting to go with it. But it fell flat, mostly I think because it's not aged terrifically, as many comedies from this time have. A lot of it felt really tin-eared and clunky and clumsy. The dialogue,
Yeah.
um, discussions between cishet white male characters and a black woman or gay characters is really just clunky, and I don't understand why they're in there. These moments could quite easily have been taken out, and I think it would serve the film much better. But that aside, there is something fun here. I had a lot of fun watching it. I did enjoy it. I think Brendan Fraser really proved himself as a charismatic
Mhm.
lead again here. This was 1994. So this was after Encino Man, also known as California Man, where he was sort of doing that caveman shtick, which he would then do in like George of the Jungle and films like this. This one is allowing him to be the pin-up type. You can see it, you can feel it. His energy is very apt for a wannabe rock star. It's both
Mm.
glamorous and sexy and a little bit dangerous, but also try hard and lacking self awareness and these things. And he brings that really well. Brendan Fraser has this really natural ability to bring the airheadedness, but does it in a fun way. Adam Sandler's fun in it too. Steve Buscemi's pretty fun in it as well. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think I think my problem is I'm not open to silliness in the way that I was when I was maybe in my teens. And this is very, very, very silly. But you're right. He's such a physical uh, comedian. Like he's really funny. And it's not that it was not enjoyable. It's just like, what? Like who came up with this film? But I liked it. It's one of those like small budget films that are a vehicle for people to showcase, as you say, their talent. Then and you can understand why. Then he would go on to do George of the Jungle, The Mummy, all those sorts of things, Blast from the Past, and Bedazzled. Yeah. And then on the flip side, let's talk about like where because I remember well, everyone probably that is a film buff of our generation will remember Crash, but I remember Crash because of the cast. Like I remember seeing the list of people in it and being like, "Oh my god, we got like Don Cheadle who would have been in, Paul Thomas Anderson movies," and was like, "Wow, he's like does these ensemble things." But then you have like Sandra Bullock and Brendan Fraser and Ludacris, and you're like, "What? Like what a combination of people."
Yeah, oh
um,
yeah.
and that was like by get into Crash, and then I wouldn't have seen it until after the Oscars. I'm assuming I would have seen it on video tape, and of course, it's kind of infamous now, Crash, for beating Brokeback Mountain at the Oscars for Best Picture, and so it was heavily kind of predicted that Brokeback Mountain would win Best Picture. And then there was this kind of rush of support, an emotional kind of support for Crash. And, I would have been upset that a queer story lost at the Oscars. Also like a artistic film lost to a more, I guess, a more televisual film, I
Yes.
guess, is a way
Mhm.
you could describe Crash.
Mhm.
Um, but Crash is really fascinating, and I know lots of people that actually really like it. So I guess I might surprise you with how much time I have for Crash, because I feel like most people, particularly people that really love the Oscars or really love film, find Crash quite like a bad example of a Best Picture winner. But anyway,
Yeah.
Crash is a story really about race. It's about racism in all forms of it, or it's trying to be all forms of it, and told by Paul Haggis, who's directed and written it. So a cis white straight man, and there are so many different threads to this story, a lot of which connect. Like there's a lot of connecting stories. So it's kind of trying to be, like the Robert Altman-esque big ensemble stories that, ebb and flow between each other, like Paul Thomas Anderson would have done with Boogie Nights or Magnolia.
Yeah.
Even to a degree like Tarantino with Pulp Fiction and things like that. Um, and yet it is not up. It doesn't match the artistic credibility of those films. A lot of the dialogue is really clunky. Like there's no. It's not subtle, and there's almost nowhere to hide for the actor, so it's all very much like set. It's all very obvious what's going on. Every scene is clear that there's a point. There's this moment at the beginning where there's a conversation about a gun. Now, there is no doubt by the end of this scene that gun is going to be incredibly important to what is going to happen to these characters. You don't spend enough time with them, with any of the stories or any of the characters, to see kind of anything past what is very literal. And where a film like Robert Altman has enough kind of moments or detail or nuances for it to feel like a real world or a real character, this just feels like kind of an advertisement about race and racism. But with some really incredible actors doing that, some less so. But overall, the film is not for me. Like, I'm not a fan of Crash. I did not enjoy rewatching it for this. I probably would rate it as one of the worst Best Picture winners. You realize that it did have an impact, more of an impact than I guess I would have realized. Like, one of the reasons I was upset Brokeback Mountain didn't win Best Film is that I thought it would be able to change people's minds if more people saw it about
Yeah.
sexuality.
Yeah.
Whereas Crash arguably did do that, but about race. I'm still grateful that people would sit and watch that film and then afterwards reflect on it on their own lives. And maybe I'm being optimistic and naive in hoping that that is the positive of a film like Crash coming out. But otherwise, I hate the idea that a film that's kind of has so many difficult and horrible things to watch wouldn't have any kind of impact on someone. Like, there's some horrible moments in this film.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. I don't really have too much to add, to be honest. But it's a tricky one because exactly for you say, and I hope there is positive that's come out of it. But I guess it wasn't ignored by the Oscars or by some of its audiences because it is literally designed to not be ignored. And that's not always a bad thing. But in this case, it's really facile. It's taking something which is incredibly, incredibly complex and a very dynamic thing, and it is just making it on the nose. And it's not interested in telling you anything about any characters except their expression on race. And that is it for the kind of hour and a half. And that is pretty much exclusively what the film is about. To the point of it feels kind of like a racist catharsis writing this. Like the way that everything is delivered, it's like somebody wanting to put that on paper for good or for bad. I don't know. I just don't really understand the approach, and because the language is so on the nose, and it has to be. I do appreciate that, but there's just no balance or nuance in here. And also, I'm a bit iffy on the fact it needs to make everyone racist. So it can't just make white characters racist. The black characters have to be racist. The Middle Eastern characters have to be racist. Everyone has to be racist. And I'm a bit nervous about what that means and why it's been presented in that way. Because is it ultimately wanting to come back to the idea of like, race is complex, we all do it. Times are hard. This is kind of a post 9/11 Los Angeles. We shouldn't do it, but we do it. I don't know. I did feel like it kind of goes there. So it's all uncomfortable. Saying all of this, though, I don't think this film is ever boring. And I don't think that's necessarily a useful or good criticism to have on it because of everything I've just said. However, rewatching it, I was expecting, this is such a drag, this film, I don't want to watch it again. I didn't find that at all. I found it really involving, not in the right ways, but I certainly wasn't bored.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I wasn't bored, but there were so many moments where I just felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
The scene I really remember, or the storyline I really remembered, and one I dreaded rewatching, and actually was worse than I remembered, was the Thandaway Newton storyline with Matt Dillon, where Matt Dillon, as the cop, pulls over a couple when she is giving um, uh, oral sex to her husband. He thinks that she is white, and when he is like frisking her, he, as she describes it, finger fucks her. It is really invasive in terms of what he does. Also, when you read up about it, it's clear that that was not. It was highlighted just before filming that was going to happen. So there's like added discomfort to watching that scene, and how that plays out. That storyline is, to me, equally uncomfortable and simplified to a point that's not actually helpful to a discourse on race. But again, going back, it's like, well, potentially people will be like, well, people might reflect on that more. But to see a cop behave that way and then become almost a heroic sort of person in some strand, is all just very much like, what is what is the point of this? But yeah, but you're right. So it's not that it's boring. I just find it uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is uncomfortable. You're right. That the image I think that goes along with this film is the sort of image of him as the savior cradling her, and that is the poster
Yeah, weird.
image.
So weird.
And it's so that is. I also find that. I mean, I would hope anyone watching it now would find that to be really problematic. Strand.
And we should add really quickly, although we did mention that Brendan Fraser is in it, he is grand, but there's absolutely his character goes on no journey. Like really, like there's not much with him at all. So great that he's there. Great that he gets a SAG award for best ensemble for Crash. But compared to some of the other storylines, he he doesn't have much to do. And even Sandra Bullock as his wife, I mean, she does, I guess, go on she has a lot of kind of soap opera sort of moments, but it's equally not as thrilling as some of the other parts of the film, which is
No,
grand.
yeah.
I don't mind the white characters having not much to do. um, and before we go into the quiz, how like we both watched the most recent film in his portfolio, No Sudden Move, which is
Yeah.
this action thriller. My God, I wish it was
Can't
adventure.
get away from it.
Action thriller film by Steven Soderbergh. And anyone that knows Steven Soderbergh, like films like Traffic or Ocean's 11, and it's this kind of handsomely mounted film with that's complicated but simple in some ways, and it's fun. Like I would say, this is one of the least memorable of his films, but that's not to say that it's bad. It's just that he has so many great films in his filmography, Steven Soderbergh, and this is just like a very enjoyable one that I'm quite happy to have sat down and watched, and has really fun people in it. I think particularly Don Cheadle and Benicio del Toro are having a great time. But it was really great to see Brendan Fraser. Like he's there very early on. He's the one like he's like this gangster's aid, that's the wrong word. Gangster's like assistant, I guess, and he's like trying to get a gang together to do this deed. Like we don't actually know what's happening, and that's kind of the joy of the film. It's like it's revealing as it goes, but he is the person that kicks it off.
You Kurt?
Who are you?
Jones.
You work for Frank?
I've done work for Frank. This is not Frank.
Okay, because if he's in, I'm out.
What did I just tell you?
And it was fun. It was fun to see him. It was fun to, have him in it. It's a very small part, but it did make me feel like this is a teaser for what we're about to get in the next few months.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's almost like what he's doing in this, had it have not been that he will have already been cast in the Scorsese film, I would imagine this is the kind of thing where you'd be like, oh, of course Scorsese would see this and cast him, because it feels so... I mean, this character could fit into the world of The Departed or any of these places. Goodfellas would slot right on in there. And I've never seen Brendan Fraser do this, and it has just made me more excited to see him work with Scorsese, even though I don't think tonally it'll necessarily be similar. I don't know. We'll see what we get with this Scorsese, but it made complete sense to me. yeah, really like menacing, like quietly menacing, and then at a moment in a more elevated way, intimidating. I think he has a really nice balance. He's really reserved and low key in the beginning, and just this brooding unease you get when his character's on screen, and then we get a kind of moment to flip that. Really, really exciting, and it really, really propelled that excitement I have for things that he's doing next. I also say I thought this one was really terrific. I really liked it. I really liked that I wasn't knowing what was going on. It's sort of a bigger picture film, but like you said, it's kind of not giving that to you. It sort of unravels. The film starts with them doing this clumsy kind of hostage situation because they need to retrieve these documents. And then from there, it's kind of like, what are these documents? And then money comes into play, and there's lots of different angles and players in this thing, and it just gets broader and broader and broader and broader. And then it's like, oh, this is where you were going with this. Okay, I didn't see that coming. It's it's so exciting that Soderbergh, who did retire, said he was retiring from filmmaking. I'm so glad he's back, and not only back, but back to being the busiest filmmaker in Hollywood. Like,
Yeah.
there is no wonder, without trying. I've never sought out to watch all of Soderbergh's films or watch a lot of them because I haven't watched all of them. But he, looking on my letterbox, is the third most watched director of all all filmmakers I've seen. That he's the third most watched for me, and I'm just not surprised because there is just so much that he does. And 90% of the time, I think it's successful. This feels very in keeping with that, but fresh for him. It feels like stuff he's done before. It feels like things we've seen before, but not in a really long time. I was excited to see what was going on. I fully thought going into this, oh gosh, this is going to be a bit of a slog, and I was looking at it going, well, this is bleak. It's not. It's the opposite. It's really propulsive and in moments surprisingly even like twee. Like you're saying, the actors are having a lot of fun because it is playful with what it's doing. And again, there are the things, the kind of inventive flourishes that Soderbergh likes to have. There's a fisheye lens used in it which I think is quite successful. I can imagine some people would find it distracting, but I think it does give that sort of odd bubbling of an old-fashioned TV set or something. I don't know, lots to enjoy. Brisk, kinetic, and ultimately wound up in a place I wasn't expecting. So much to my surprise, although it shouldn't have been because I really love Soderbergh, I thought it was so good. I thought it was so good.
Yeah, it's a shame. That's a sort of, middle or budget movie with recognizable people that used to do well in the cinema. Like would be like I'm
Yeah,
trying to think like The Score. Do you remember like Edward Norton, Robert De Niro, Marlon Brando, that sort of film?
sure.
But because of COVID and stuff, it just hasn't found an audience. So, but maybe it will some way. But no, really, really wonderful film. And before we do the quiz, like you have to pick one film you'd recommend for people to watch. And I'm just going to flag it, what you think they may not have seen, or just basically what you think people should seek out.
I'm happy to go back and touch on it again and say Gods and Monsters.
Mm.
It is because it is also way more accessible. Like you said, you made a really good point of saying it is not the niche film that it looks like from the outside, and I think a lot of people would get a lot out of it.
I'm gonna say, because we didn't get to talk about it much, is Blast from the Past, which I just found like it's such a fun film. It's like the director of The First Wives Club. It is just so silly and fun. Alicia Silverstone is in it too as a romantic interest for Brendan. Sissy Spacek and Christopher Walken play his parents. It's just so silly and romantic and all these sorts of things. I have a lot of time for it, but yeah, it's nowhere near as accomplished as something like Gods and Monsters. But I just think it's like, oh, I don't know. For somehow it feels less seen than some of his other films. So yeah, I think there's lots of amazing options.
Yeah, lots of fun, and hopefully, like we're saying, fingers crossed that these things coming are as exciting as they have the potential to be.
And before we go into the other exciting things that we want him to do, I am going to be quizzed by you.
You are. It's your favorite time. It is quiz time for you.
Well, I'm not nervous.
Oh
I'm
no,
not nervous at all.
don't be nervous. I decided with the quiz this time to kind of go down a little bit of a different path with my approach. So it's going to be a little bit Brendan Fraser adjacent, shall we say. So
Amazing.
what this quiz is, and don't ask me why it sprung to me in this way, but it did. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be playing you some clips from films. And these are going to be of Brendan Fraser co-stars, or people he has co-starred with before, singing in a film. So
Love
these
it.
are them in films that are not with Brendan Fraser. But what I need you to do is tell me who the performer is who's singing and what film it is, and then also if you can link it back to the film that they starred in with Brendan Fraser. That would be fabulous.
That is super. And I guess for my prize, I want him to be Oscar nominated for any of the films that we've talked about in the future.
Fabulous. Then let's hope that this all works just as we hope it will.
Yes.
Okay, so here comes clip number 1.
Let me see you get low. You scared, you scared. Drop your ass to the floor. You scared, you scared. Let me see you get low. You scared, you scared. Drop your ass to the floor. You scared.
So I know that's Sandra Bullock, right?
That is Sandra Bullock, yes.
And obviously they were in Crash together, as we just said. I want to say that clip's from The Heat, but I don't know. I know there's a drunk scene in a bar with Melissa McCarthy. Is
That's
it
a
The Heat?
really good guess, actually, but no, it's not The Heat.
So it's my first thought was Miss Congeniality, but it's not that because I that doesn't make any sense, is it?
It's not that either. I'll give you a clue and say the other voice you hear momentarily in that clip is our recently, sadly departed legend Betty White.
For some reason, I thought you were going to say Helen McCrory, and I was like, what film is Sandra Bullock and Helen McCrory in where they dance together? But sadly, that did not happen. Well, then in that case, it has to be The Proposal. I know we want him to be Oscar nominated, but that feels like I was just told the answer. But yeah, The Proposal. God, I don't remember that. When were they doing that?
There's a moment where Betty White is wearing. I don't
The
know if it's
bird
appropriate or
thing.
not. She's wearing, yeah, kind of what looks to be like Native American getup, and she's at
Oh,
a
yes.
fire, and Sandra Bullock happens upon her in the woods, and she gets her to chant, and
Yeah.
Sandra Bullock starts just singing Lil Jon's "Get Low."
So it's a scene. It's a cutout scene from Crash about race.
Very similar. Actually,
Similar
this was
vibe.
less on the nose.
Oh my god.
Okay, fabulous. That was Sandra Bullock. Okay, here comes another one for you.
How glad the many millions of Timothys and Williams would be.
I'm William.
Don't interrupt. To capture me.
I'm so delighted you've brought this film up in conversation, and also this. I mean, I'm always happy to talk about Rachel Weisz. This is Rachel Weisz in Definitely Maybe, which is this rom-com film I absolutely love, with Ryan Reynolds and is it Isla Fisher, and Rachel Weisz, and I can't remember. It's not Elizabeth Banks, is it? Who is the other person in it?
I think it is, isn't it? Hold on.
Is it? And Abigail Breslin plays his daughter, and she's trying to set him up, and he falls in love with all these different people. And yeah, Rachel Weisz sings this song. Oh, and it's just so lovely. I really love that movie.
Oh, that's good. I actually thought that one was going to be a really hard one, but Rachel Weisz singing a bit of Gershwin in Definitely Maybe works for you. Great. Well done.
Oh yeah, and they were in The Mummy, obviously, together, in The Mummy 2.
They
Or
are in
whatever, The Mummy Returns.
They sure are. They're in The Mummy and The Mummy Returns together. How about another one?
Then if someone will give me a toothful of gin, I will tell how I once played a part in East Lynne.
Oh my god. It's Gus. Is that his name?
It's Gus, yes.
Gus. It's Gus, the... Fuck, I don't remember which cat that is. Gus,
the theater cat.
Oh, of course it is. Oh my god. Oh my god. So it's Ian McKellen in Cats as the theater cat Gus. And actually, do you know what? One of the highlights of the film is Ian McKellen.
Oh yeah,
as
hands
Gus,
down.
the cat. So I'm sorry that I'm like grimacing in reaction. Yeah, and they were obviously in Gods and Monsters together, where he
Fabulous.
played James Whale, the filmmaker cat.
Kind of. He's a bit of a cat in that. Here is the final clip of the round.
Let me sing you a waltz out of nowhere, out of my thoughts. Let me sing you a waltz.
So I'm crying. No, I that makes me really sad. In a good way. Happy sad is a nice way to put it. That's of course Julie Depley in Before Sunset.
Mhm.
But I can't think of. I just have no idea what film they're in together, and that's going to really annoy me because I feel like once you say it, I'd be like, of course, Julie Depley's in this film, or maybe not. Maybe it's not obvious.
No, I think this one's probably a hard one. I've certainly not seen this one, so you may not have seen it either.
Crash.
Uh,
No,
the
we
one
lied
we
about
wish we hadn't seen. No, this is In the Air I Breathe.
it.
But I just had to have that because the scene of Julie Delpy singing "A Waltz for a Night." It's I mean that film is just heaven, and that moment is it did. But yeah, it fully makes me want to cry, so I had to include it.
Yeah, it's made me sad now.
Oh,
But on
it's
the
beautiful.
flip side, now Brendan will win his Oscar. I can't remember if I asked for a nomination or a win, but he's getting either or both.
Yeah, very exciting for him. He's winning. Brilliant.
I'd love that. But let's plan go further ahead. Like, so he's going to win an Oscar in the next, like in 2023. What do we want to see from him beyond that?
Oh well, lots and lots and lots. If we start with sequels, because I was a little bit unsure on sequels, but I reckon you might have a better answer to this. But even though he wants to be away from those worlds, and understandably so, and because the Tom Cruise Mummy was about, I haven't even seen it, but it looked diabolical. Surely there's room to just try it again, bring it back, and see if we can have that magic back. Bring them in, but maybe not them at the absolute forefront. But it could be sort of a passing the baton moment from Brendan onto maybe a new. I don't know what you even call him, Tomb Hunter.
Well, yeah, Tomb Raider. Well, I don't. Yeah.
Tomb
Well, we've
Raider.
already. You can't do that. That's too much of a. That's touching another property there. But
I
yeah, you
know,
could do that.
but just because I want to be back there, because of that warm fuzziness that it does continue to give me, I would like to go back, and we can ignore maybe 2 and 3 and have something wonderful again. So that's where I'm going to start us off. What about you?
Well, I'm going to cheat here and just talk because I wrote this under my remake suggestion was remaking The Mummy 3, but doing it going back to Egypt, focusing much more on having Rachel Weisz, having it more like, as you say, passing the baton even on to a new generation, but having that sort of romantic element to it and it being, I don't know, escapist. I think it could be really fun. So that was my remake idea, which is a cheat, I guess. But my sequel was a bit wilder. This is a bit of a muddied suggestion. I'm Bedazzled. Because Bedazzled, the original film, the devil appears and grants these wishes. So in theory, you could do a sequel to that where he's older and the wishes are a bit different. Thinking a bit more of I would love if someone like, say, Paul Thomas Anderson did a kind of Punch Drunk Love-esque update of Bedazzled. So it's humorous and light, but it has and it uses what Brendan Fraser does so well, like what Paul Thomas Anderson does with Adam Sandler and Punch Drunk Love. But it's I don't know, it's for a different audience. Like, it's not made as this silly comedy. It's thoughtful about choices in life and right and wrong and what we want versus what we need. I think it could be really special. to have Bedazzled 2, The Devil's Back, directed by someone like Paul Thomas Anderson, or even then go completely wild. And what's the name of the guys who did Uncut Gems, the brothers? Like, have them do it with Elizabeth Hurley and Brendan Back. What are their names? That's so annoying. They also did Good Times with Robert Pattinson.
Oh, the Safdie brothers.
Yeah, or get like just something kind of chaotic, but structurally very impressive and fascinating. I'd love that. I mean, equally, if they want to just do a silly second film, let's do that, but have it a bit more aware of its audience and the world we live in.
I love that. Fabulous. Okay, great. Where I went on the remake train, I was unsure. He is slated to be in a film, I guess, of Batgirl that they're working on. But I was thinking of kind of Batman Returns, and specifically the character of the Penguin, which Danny DeVito did an amazing job of. But what Danny DeVito did so effectively in that film, and is often kind of overlooked because of all the other characters in that film, perhaps, is he is really dangerous and quite scary in that film. And based on what I saw from Brendan in No Sudden Move, I can imagine him bringing a really complex and contemporary version of the Penguin. I really like what Colin Farrell was doing in the new Matt Reeves Batman film too, but it's very kind of prosthetic heavy. I think there's something in between where it could be more naturalistic, but with that danger and that menace in an exciting way. So if we were to have a kind of Batman Returns type Batman story to ever be on the screen again, I think he would have been a really interesting casting. Like now, I think, at this point in his career, he'd be a really interesting casting in something like that.
Yeah, like it is fascinating. I think Colin Farrell does a good job in that Batman film, but it seems unnecessary, the makeup choices and things like that.
Yeah.
And actually, Brendan Fraser would have been more naturally able to bring that physical element that Colin Farrell was striving so hard to achieve. So yeah, that's a good one.
Thanks.
I would also, so in terms of the last choice, filmmaker, this is this is going more into the mainstream than I guess maybe Brendan is up for now. But a film that I watched on Disney Plus and is just so taken with is a film called Better Nate Than Never, which is it's made for streaming services, so it's not I guess we'd call it more TV film or streamer film than a proper film. Having said that, the writer director Tim Federle, I think that's how you say his name, I am very excited for. Like, I think how he tells this very sort of simple story with so much heart, and I don't want to use the word creativity because I feel like I just throw that around, but it is like it's really well judged how he achieves this very quite simple, straightforward film and keeps this big heart. He's also due to be making Sister Act 3. So I'm expecting this guy to, be successful. And I would I think he would totally he seems like the sort of person, because how he utilizes like Lucy Kudrow in Better Nate Than Ever, that would appreciate someone like Brendan Fraser and what he can achieve and what he is good at, and to give him some sort of role. Either I was then thinking, like, again, Sister Act 3 is going straight to Disney Plus, not into cinemas it seems, but to give him a part in Sister Act 3, like he could be, we had Harvey Keitel. Why couldn't he be someone that helps Dolores, Whoopi Goldberg's character? Or why couldn't there be something there, Or maybe he's a priest in charge of something. I don't know, but I would love to see him in this world of something big, entertaining, but heartfelt. And that's why I loved him in the first place and love to see him again.
Yeah, that's such a good pairing of the things, because I just watched that Better Nate Than Ever as well, and was also totally charmed by it. So what a lovely idea. Sister Act 3, let's have it. Great.
That's a great title. I hope they use it. Sister Act 3, let's have it.
Let's have it. I kind of went also into the kind of the fuzzier thing. Although I have two answers here, but I don't have them kind of fleshed out too much, so I'll give them both. Is that I also want that. I want to see also, as much as I'm excited for the different things we're seeing from him, I want to see him get to be kind of, and this sounds like such a boring answer, but it's just because it's him, and I would find it so comforting, is to see him get to just be like a family man type. So getting Steve Martin type roles, and I immediately thought of Father of the Bride, and therefore I thought of Nancy Myers. So Brendan Fraser as a Steve Martin father type in a kind of chaotic family comedy, as a father at odds with his daughters as well, whoever his wife, what family, whatever it might be. I find the thought of that very exciting, and would love to see something like that. If we are going to kind of continue on the darker or more complex train, perhaps, why not give him to our reigning Best Director queen, Jane Campion, who, with what she kind of got Benedict Cumberbatch and a lot of the cast to do in The Power of the Dog, I think she could really harness the energy that I was describing earlier from Brendan Fraser again. And I'm specifically thinking from what I saw her actually also doing in The Top of the Lake, the TV series. That kind of tone, I could see him in that world in a really, probably quite a hard-hitting type role. I think they could be a really good pairing. So that would be super exciting, and obviously I would love that. But I don't know. I want something fuzzy as well. So I'm gonna maybe slightly more selfishly champion my Nancy Myers push.
Yeah, I would love that. Oh, if he did all these films, yeah, and perhaps he will. Like, it will be interesting to see in a year's time what will be offered to him and what his career will be like. And even if he really wants to do it, like, there's a part
Mhm.
of me that thinks maybe he's kind of happy enough. But
Sure.
I've really enjoyed kind of reflecting on him as a star, like what he would have meant to me personally, but also looking at what he meant to other people and his films, like from Crash to The Mummy. It's just all really fascinating to me. So no, I'm so glad we did him. And I hope everyone knows him a little bit better.
Yes. We are champions of the Brendonisons.
Yeah, let's make that happen. Okay, so until next time, Scott, where can people find us?
So please do come and find us if you haven't already. You can grab us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram at don'tknowher_pod. Or if you prefer the old methods of the emailing, you can do that too. And you can drop us a line at don'tknowherpod@gmail.com.
Yes, and please do share the podcast with anyone you think would be interested in it. Give us reviews, 5 stars, nothing else on iTunes really does help people find us. If you want to give us less than 5, that's okay. But do let us know why in a gentle, comforting way. Joking. If you've made it this far, I don't know why you wouldn't give us anything less than 5. And thank you for listening. But yeah, and I'm really excited to talk about our next person. We're going to have also a special guest. So it's all go, go, go.
Yay, it's super exciting. Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. We look forward to you joining us again.
Goodbye.
Bye, 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 bye.